right now, inside your veins, you are walking this chemical tightrope over a jagged canyon. Lean a fraction of an inch to the left, or, a fraction of an inch to the right, and your organs literally start to shut down.
Yeah, it's a very precarious situation.
It is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring the invisible, high-stakes world of acid-base balance in the human body. We're pulling from some fascinating medical source material today, and our mission is to decode this massive, interconnected web of biological dots and lines.
Right, so you can understand the life or death balancing act happening inside of you every single second.
Exactly.
And I think the sheer scale of that interconnected web is really what makes this so compelling. I mean, when we look at the chemical pathways in the human body, every single dot affects another dot.
Yeah.
Every line pulls on another line. But at the very center of that complex map is this shockingly straightforward premise.
Which is?
That health problems lead to acid-base imbalance. An imbalance in your blood's chemistry isn't just like an isolated event. It doesn't spontaneously happen because you had a bad day at work,
Right, it's not a mood thing.
Exactly. It's an alarm bell. It is the ultimate symptom indicating that somewhere in that vast network, another system has critically failed.
So, to really understand how a health problem triggers that alarm,
Yeah.
we kind of have to establish what balance actually means here.
Right.
Because when I hear the word balance, I picture something relaxing,
Mm-hmm.
like a Zen garden, or maybe doing yoga on a paddleboard.
A very peaceful image.
Yeah. But looking at the clinical data in our sources, balance in human blood is more like a state of intense, constant biological warfare.
That's a great way to put it.
The normal range for human blood pH is between 7.35 and 7.45.
And that incredibly narrow window is literally the only environment where human cellular life can thrive.
Wow.
All the enzymes that power your muscles, your brain, your heart, they are optimized exclusively for that 7.35 to 7.45 environment.
Okay, let's unpack this, because a margin of 0.1 news sounds insanely fragile. It is. When you tell me I have a safe zone of 7.35 to 7.45, my brain immediately thinks, well, that's practically the same number.
Yeah, to a layperson, it looks like a rounding error.
Exactly. So I want you, the listener, to picture that tightrope over the canyon again. You aren't walking over a foam pit in a training gym here. You're suspended over a drop, the wind is howling, and the rope is like paper thin.
Right.
That 0.1 margin is the width of the rope.
And stepping off that rope has immediate consequences. If your pH drops below that 7.35 mark, dipping into the 6.8 to 7.35 range, you enter a state called acidosis.
Acidosis, okay.
Yeah. And if you climb above the 7.45 mark, up into the 7.45 to 7.8 range, you are in alkalosis.
And both of those are bad news, right?
Extremely bad news. Both of those states represent a severe alteration in your body's environment. Acidosis depresses the central nervous system.
Oh, wow.
So you become disoriented and eventually comatose. Alkalosis, on the other hand, overexcites the nervous system.
To the opposite problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
That leads to muscle spasms, convulsions, and respiratory arrest. And the source material is brutally clear about what happens if you fall entirely off the rope.
Yeah, I've read that part. It's intense.
It is. If your pH dips below 6.8 or climbs above 7.8, the outcome is simply death. The cellular machinery just stops functioning.
Below 6.8 or above 7.8, game over.
Game over.
Which makes the mechanics of how we stay on that rope like the most important physiological process we have.
Without a doubt.
But the visual our sources used to explain this balance completely shattered my assumptions.
How so?
Well, normally when we think of a balanced scale, we think of equal weights, right? We think of symmetry.
Sure, 1 pound on the left, 1 pound on the right.
Exactly. But biological chemistry apparently operates on an entirely different logic. To stay perfectly hovering in that safe zone, your body requires exactly 1 part carbonic acid balancing against 20 parts base bicarbonate.
Yeah, the 1:20 ratio.
Wait, 1:20? I mean, if I'm building a bridge or designing any kind of stable system, I want symmetry. I want equal load-bearing pillars.
Of course.
Why would human evolution favor a system that is so heavily lopsided toward the base bicarbonate? It feels like we are inherently primed to fail.
It really does seem counterintuitive at first.
Right. It's like trying to balance a seesaw at a playground. And on one side, you have a single, extremely dense, heavy bowling ball. And that's your 1 part carbonic acid.
I like this analogy.
Thanks. So to get the seesaw to hover perfectly parallel to the ground, you can't just put another bowling ball on the other side. You have to carefully stack exactly 20 tennis balls, your 20 parts base bicarbonate on the opposite seat.
Right.
Why 20 tennis balls for every 1 bowling ball?
Well, you're touching on the core vulnerability of human metabolism here. We are essentially acid-producing machines.
Oh, just by functioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every time you flex a muscle, your cells produce lactic acid. When your body breaks down fats, it produces acidic ketones.
Wow.
Even the basic act of your cells generating energy creates carbon dioxide, which then turns into acid in your blood.
So we are just constantly flooding our own system with acid.
The sheer volume of acid we generate just by being alive is staggering. So we need that massive 20-to-1 stockpile of base bicarbonate ready at all times to neutralize that constant flood.
I see.
If we had a 1-to-1 ratio, the first time you jogged up a flight of stairs, the lactic acid would completely overwhelm your system.
And drop your pH below 6.8.
And kill you, yes.
So the asymmetrical scale isn't a design flaw at all. It's a massive shock absorber for our daily lives.
Exactly.
The 20 tennis balls are there to soak up the impact every time a new bowling ball gets dropped on the other side.
That's a perfect way to visualize it.
But that brings up the big operational question. If a health problem introduces a massive spike in acid, or, if something goes wrong and we lose our base bicarbonate, how does the body actually adjust the weights on that seesaw?
Well, the source material outlines 3 specific mechanisms that make up our internal defense squad.
Okay, let's hear them.
You have the Bucker system, the respiratory system, and the renal system.
These are the regulators keeping you on the tightrope.
Yes. And they operate in a very specific tiered hierarchy based on speed and power.
Okay, so who's the first responder?
The first line of defense is the chemical buffer system. Think of buffers as microscopic chemical sponges floating in your bloodstream right now.
Sponges, okay.
The moment an extra hydrogen ion, which is essentially the building block of acid, enters your blood, these sponges instantly bind to it, neutralizing its acidic effect.
Oh, wow. How fast does that happen?
In fractions of a second.
Okay, so they are the immediate first responders. But, sponges have a limit, right?
They absolutely do.
You can only soak up so much still before the sponge is completely saturated.
Right.
So if a major health problem hits, say, a severe infection or a metabolic crisis and it floods the blood with acid, those chemical sponges are going to get overwhelmed pretty quickly.
And that is precisely when the body calls in the heavy artillery.
The major organs.
Yes. This brings us to the second tier of the defense network, the respiratory system.
The lungs.
Correct. Now, we typically think of our lungs solely as a gas exchange mechanism. You breathe in oxygen for the cells, you breathe out carbon dioxide as waste.
Right, that's what we learn in high school biology.
But in the context of acid-base balance, your lungs are actually one of the most powerful pH regulators you have.
I'm having a hard time connecting those dots. How does simply inhaling and exhaling air manipulate the chemical acidity of my blood?
It all comes down to what carbon dioxide actually does when it interacts with water in your bloodstream.
Okay.
When CO2 mixes with H2O, it forms carbonic acid.
Oh.
So in the language of your earlier analogy, carbon dioxide is the raw material for the bowling balls.
That makes so much sense.
Because of this, your brain has specialized chemoreceptors that are constantly monitoring your blood's pH. If your blood starts becoming too acidic, if the pH drops toward that 7.35 edge, your brain sends an emergency signal to your lungs to breathe faster and deeper.
Oh, so by hyperventilating, you are literally blowing off carbon dioxide with every exhale. You're throwing the raw material for the acid out of your body into the air, lightening the bowling ball side of the seesaw.
You've got it. And exactly the opposite happens if your blood becomes too alkaline or too basic.
Wait, how does that work?
If you have too much base bicarbonate and your pH climbs towards 7.45, your brain tells your lungs to slow down.
Oh, your breathing becomes shallow.
Yes. You retain carbon dioxide, purposely letting it build up in your blood to create more acid and pull the seesaw back down to neutral.
And how fast can the lungs do this?
The respiratory system can kick in within minutes to make these drastic adjustments.
That is wild. Your breathing rate is actively manipulating your blood chemistry in real time.
It really is incredible.
Which makes me wonder about the reverse scenario. If holding my breath retains CO2 and builds acid, does that mean if I just decide to hold my breath for a really long time, I am literally acidifying my own blood?
You are.
Wow.
Yeah, you are inducing a mild, temporary state of respiratory acidosis.
That's crazy.
But eventually, the urge to breathe, which is actually driven by that very buildup of acid and CO2, it will override your conscious control, forcing you to exhale and correct the balance.
So the chemical buffers act in seconds, the lungs act in minutes. But the sources list a third regulator, right?
Yes.
The renal system, our kidneys. But like, if the lungs can just blow off the acid, why do we need the kidneys involved at all?
Because the lungs can only handle volatile acids.
Volatile meaning.
Acids that can be converted into a gas and exhaled. But your body produces plenty of fixed acids like uric acid or lactic acid, which simply cannot be breathed out.
Oh, I see.
Furthermore, the lungs have no way to manipulate the other side of the seesaw.
The tennis balls.
Exactly. They can't create or destroy the 20 tennis balls of base bicarbonate. That is the exclusive domain of the kidneys.
So the kidneys are managing the base side of the equation.
And they do it with incredible precision.
Yeah.
As your blood filters through the kidneys, they make these active, microscopic decisions about what to keep and what to throw away in your urine. If your blood is too acidic, the kidneys will physically excrete hydrogen ions out of your body into the urine.
While simultaneously doing what?
Reabsorbing base bicarbonate back into the blood to reinforce your 20-to-1 stockpile.
Oh, wow.
And if your blood is too alkaline, they do the reverse. They just dump bicarbonate into the urine to lower your base levels.
It's like the ultimate filtration plant.
Yeah.
But it must take a lot longer to process all your blood and manufacture urine than it does to just, take a deep breath.
It does. The renal system is the most powerful regulator we have, but it is by far the slowest.
How slow are we talking?
It can take hours or even a few days for the kidneys to fully correct a severe imbalance. But once they lock in, they provide the long-term stability needed to keep you safely on that tightrope.
So we have this incredible multi-layered defense squad. Sponges acting in seconds, lungs acting in minutes, kidneys acting over days.
It's a very robust system.
But let's go back to that very first premise from the research.
Yes.
Health problems lead to acid-base imbalance. Sometimes the health problem is so massive that it simply steamrolls past the buffers, the lungs, and the kidneys.
Unfortunately, yes.
The scale completely tips, the pH plummets or spikes, and the patient crashes. When a patient arrives at a hospital in that state, they are in the danger zone.
Absolute danger zone.
So how do medical professionals figure out what went wrong in this invisible chemical web?
Well, this is where medical diagnostics start to look a lot like forensic science.
Forensics?
Yeah, because remember, the acid-base imbalance is just a symptom. It's the blaring fire alarm.
Right, you're right.
To save the patient, doctors cannot just treat the alarm. They have to find the fire.
Okay.
They have to trace the chemical chaos backward to pinpoint the exact underlying health problem that triggered the collapse. And they have to do it before the pH hits 6.8 or 7.8.
The source material introduces the tools doctors use to solve this puzzle, but it kind of drops them like a cliffhanger.
It does gloss over the details a bit.
Yeah. It points to interpretation of ABGs and the acid-base mnemonic Rome. These sound incredibly clinical, and honestly, if you don't have a medical degree, they just look like alphabet soup.
I can see how they'd look that way.
But these are the master keys to the whole system. Let's start with ABGs. What is an ABG, and how does reading it solve the mystery?
So ABG stands for arterial blood gas.
Okay.
It's a specific type of blood draw taken directly from an artery, usually the wrist rather than a vein.
Why an artery?
Because arterial blood has just left the lungs and the heart, so it provides a real-time snapshot of the body's exact chemical state.
Ah, so it hasn't gone through the whole body yet.
Exactly. When a doctor orders an ABG, they are looking for 3 specific numbers.
Which are?
First, the overall pH. Is it dropping below 7.35 or climbing above 7.45? Second, they look at the PaSO2, which is the level of carbon dioxide.
Okay, that tells them about the lungs.
Right. It tells them exactly what the respiratory system is doing. And third, they look at the HCO3, which is the level of base bicarbonate.
And that tells them exactly what the kidneys are doing.
Precisely.
So the ABG gives you the raw data. It basically tells you the exact weight of a bowling ball and the exact number of tennis balls on the seesaw at that given second.
Yes.
But raw data is just a bunch of numbers unless you know how to interpret the pattern.
Exactly. And that brings us to Rome.
Yes, Rome. This feels like a secret decoder ring for medical professionals. How does Rome actually translate those ABG numbers into a diagnosis?
ROME is an acronym that stands for Respiratory Opposite Metabolic Equal.
Respiratory opposite, metabolic equal.
Right. It's an elegant, rapid-fire mental shortcut used in emergency settings to instantly figure out which organ system is failing.
Okay, let's break down the first half. Respiratory opposite.
When the respiratory system, the lungs, is the root cause of the problem, the patient's carbon dioxide levels and their pH will move in opposite directions on the lab results.
Walk me through a concrete example of that. What does opposite directions look like in a real patient?
Imagine a patient comes into the ER having a severe asthma attack. Their airway is constricted, right?
Right. so they can't breathe out properly.
Exactly. Because they can't exhale properly, they are trapping carbon dioxide in their lungs.
And carbon dioxide is the raw material for acid.
Yes. So on their ABG results, their carbon dioxide numbers will be abnormally high. The arrow points up.
Okay.
Because all that trapped CO2 is turning into acid, their overall blood pH will drop into acidosis. The arrow points down.
Oh, CO2 goes up, pH goes down.
Yeah.
Opposite directions.
Exactly. The doctor instantly knows this is respiratory acidosis. The lungs are the problem.
That makes perfect sense. The arrows cross. But what about the second half of the mnemonic? Metabolic equal. I'm assuming metabolic refers to the kidneys and the base bicarbonate side of the equation.
You assume correctly. When the kidneys or the broader metabolic system is the root cause of the problem, the patient's bicarbonate levels and their pH will move in the exact same or equal direction.
Okay, give me the visual for metabolic equal. How do those arrows move together?
Let's take a patient suffering from severe diabetic ketoacidosis, or DKA.
Okay.
Their body, unable to use sugar, is burning fat at an extreme rate, which floods the bloodstream with acidic ketones.
Right, we talked about ketones earlier.
The chemical buffers and the kidneys try to fight back by using up the base bicarbonate to neutralize the acid. They are basically throwing all their tennis balls at the problem, depleting the body's reserves.
Oh, wow.
So on their ABG results, their bicarbonate levels will be dangerously low. The arrow points down.
Okay.
And because they are losing their base buffer, their overall blood pH will also crash into acidosis. The arrow points down.
Bicarbonate goes down, pH goes down, equal directions.
The doctor instantly knows this is metabolic acidosis.
The Rome mnemonic is brilliant. It completely cuts through the noise of a chaotic emergency.
It's highly effective.
If pH and CO2 move opposite, blame the lungs. If pH and bicarbonate move equal, blame the kidneys or metabolism.
Yeah.
It allows the doctor to look at a sheet of numbers and trace the path of failure backward through the interconnected web. The health problem caused the imbalance tipped the 1-to-20 ratio, the defense mechanisms failed, and now the doctor uses Rome to find out exactly where the chain broke so they can treat the root cause.
It highlights why those diagnostic shortcuts are so necessary. I mean, you don't have time to ponder the physiological intricacies when the patient's pH is sliding towards 6.8.
Right, you just need answers.
You apply Rome, you identify the primary failure, and you intervene to save the patient's life.
This entire deep dive has completely changed how I view my own body. We take so much of our internal chemistry for granted.
We really do.
To wrap up our journey today, I want to remind you of the invisible balancing act happening right now as you listen to this. You are walking a tightrope over a jagged canyon between a pH of 7.35 and 7.45.
A very thin rope.
Yes, you're relying on a bizarre asymmetrical balance of exactly one heavy bowling ball of carbonic acid against exactly 20 tennis balls of base bicarbonate.
And your survival is being actively managed by an elite 3-tiered defense squad.
Your chemical sponges, your lungs, and your kidneys, all working in tandem to keep you out of the danger zones.
Yeah, and as we reflect on that incredible architecture of survival, there is a final lingering question that emerges when you look at how these systems overlap.
Oh, what's that?
The foundational rule of this entire subject is that health problems lead to an acid-base imbalance.
Right.
But we also just established that the respiratory system and the renal system are the primary regulators keeping you balanced.
Yeah.
So consider the ultimate paradox. What happens to your internal chemistry when the health problem causing the crisis is a massive respiratory or renal failure?
Oh, man.
If the very organs tasked with acting as the safety net are the ones on fire, who regulates the regulators when the defense system itself becomes the threat?
That is a chilling thought to end on. The tightrope gets infinitely more dangerous when the safety net is the thing pulling you down. Who regulates the regulators? I love a question that makes you fundamentally reconsider how a system operates. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. Your curiosity is what drives us to unpack these hidden worlds. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the interconnected webs around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.